surveyed the backdrop of mountains and forests in the distance, the reds and oranges of a sunset dipping every surface in an autumnal hue. It's beautiful. The character on screen idles as I spin the camera, checking out his blood-spattered armour and the monstrous corpse at his feet. I think back to what led me to this point, how I tracked down the beast, made inquiries of local peasants, and prepared potions and ores to strengthen the hunter and weaken the prey. It was worth every second, because as I pushed the thumbstick forward to carry out yet another quest, all I could think of was, I'm Geralt and I'm a badass. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt is like being hooked up to a medical drip, filled with dopamine and gratification. It may not have steadily rewarded me with loot or experience, enticing me with the prospect of better gear like Borderlands or Diablo. No, what it rewarded me with was more. More world to explore, more quests, more characters, just more. The sheer scope and depth of The Witcher 3's world is awe-inspiring. The joy of getting to explore was all the motivation I need to keep playing. And after wandering through the game's vast world for over 40 hours, I began to understand the game length estimation CD Projekt Red had put out before release. Each time I would hear the completion sound effect for a quest, I would suffer a Pavlovian response. A grin would spread across my face and I would have to head out to complete another. I realised that if I wanted to, I could spend 200 hours playing the game, and throughout that mammoth undertaking, I would constantly have things to do. Not only is The Witcher 3's open world the largest I've played to date, but it is also the most densely packed and well realised. There is always something to do. Usually I find open world games hard to focus on. The enormous spaces eating up my valuable playtime with running, swimming, riding, driving to the next objective marker. I find I'm pulled from the core narrative to do uninteresting side quests to gain the levels I need to get the weapon, key, skill I need to continue the story. They make me feel like a small boat on a rough sea with a constantly changing current. I'm pulled in every direction till eventually I hit a rock and sink. The Witcher 3 does this. I'm wrenched in all directions, but unlike the games before it, I never hit the rock. I think it is partly due to how side quests are structured. They feel fleshed out. They have a narrative all to themselves. For instance, I stumbled, this is not a cliche but I'll come back to that shortly, onto a side quest which involved destroying a spectre terrorising a settlement. The narrative stretched out over a 20-minute period where I was made to interrogate villagers, search for a missing body and then finally confront the ghost. Where this simple quest excelled and didn't just fall into a category of busy work was in the way it span a story. Through your interrogations and subtle clues left both in dialogue and the world, a narrative started to take shape. It had romance and tragedy, and when I finally faced the spectre, I felt genuine empathy towards it. This constantly clever integration of narrative into everything in its world is how The Witcher 3 keeps you interested. On the way to an objective, I rode through a long deserted battlefield. It was impressive, but what was most impressive was how it was understated. Not long exposition from Geralt was needed. It was something you passed through, and that was all. It told a story and added depth without uttering a word. The world itself told a visual story. It quietly added to the experience. I could not write my opinions on The Witcher 3 without at some point mentioning the monsters of its world. From griffins to drowners, I found I had a morbid fascination with all of them. The character designs, all rooted in Scandinavian fable and legend, had my eyes feeling blissfully content. The three crones who appear in the first act are particularly creative and twisted examples of a design team's talents. All three capture an essence of witchiness while not becoming cliches, a balance I find remarkable. And while I enjoyed the aesthetics of the monsters, I also spent significant amounts of time in the bestiary, not just looking up the potions or oil which was best used to fight them, but also to merely read the blurbs and snippets of lore. This itself added depth to the more grueling monster encounters once I reached Skellig in the second act. As referenced at the very beginning of the game during the tutorial section, the Witcher must study as well as train with a sword. After spending some time with the bestiary, I felt I'd actually done a fair bit of studying. I felt knowledgeable, and once again the world sucked me in. For a cultivation of interest by the game's tools, I had unknowingly partook in some low-level role-playing. Now, I mentioned earlier how I stumbled across a quest. It was an apt description. For all that The Witcher 3's world is beautiful and captivating, its methods of navigation are its equal in terms of clumsiness and frustration. Roach, Geralt's trusty steed, was a personification of a dichotomy with 4 hooves and a mane. When I would whistle for him, I would find he would get stuck on geometry, stuck behind a tree, a wall, a person, and even once inside a house. When finally I would hop on and start my gallop into the great beyond, I found him just as frustrating. And that's where the dilemma came in. I needed to use Roach to get around the world quicker, but every time I did, it revealed imperfections of the game and its gameplay. Each time I set off on a journey, I at some point would be pulled out of the experience, as either I failed to get past a tree or take a turn, subsequently fumbling with a thumbstick to try and reposition myself to get back on my way. I started to find myself avoiding his use, simply using fast travel and then running to objectives. It may have been slower, but allowed me to sightsee in a less infuriating way. This looseness to the controls tarnished other areas of gameplay too. Although I found the combat solid in a sort of ponderous way, Geralt had a knack of getting stuck on a cobblestone or other small piece of geometry. This usually ended in a beating which was not caused by my lack of skill. It's a shame these problems were a constant irritation throughout my time with the game. Don't get me wrong though, I still enjoyed the gameplay immensely, enjoyed the fighting, enjoyed the navigation and interactions, but when a world is so fully realised, the gameplay just seems that much weaker in comparison. This is part of the overall problem I have with The Witcher 3. To use an analogy, The Witcher 3 is Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody, a sprawling epic with immense highs and lows. The issue is the guitarist keeps missing a beat and falling out of time. The foundation of greatness is all but there, but something keeps falling slightly flat. The main narrative feels well structured, if a tad long in the middle, and had a satisfactory conclusion. Well, that might be a bit of an understatement. My last hour with the game was spent on the edge of my seat, drumming my legs when not actively playing. I wanted to reach the end, and when I did, I just wanted more. I already wanted the sequel. I wanted to keep following the characters' stories. CD Projekt Red managed to capture my engagement. They got so many elements of character iteration spot on, especially with the father and daughter-like moments between Ciri and Geralt. These had complexity and depth, and so did many interactions with other characters. But then there would be a ham-fisted moment, a poorly written sequence which either fell out of character or shoddily executed. Each time this happened, it felt like the character in question was being possessed by a far less mature writer. The writing, which was overall very consistent, suffered from getting lost in being a game, or more accurately, what the mass market believes as a game to be. The affliction of this sounds cool rather than this sounds right. And again, this is only a gripe because of the high standard of writing overall. In other games these issues would go unnoticed, whispered, but in The Witcher 3 these scream out. I can't recommend The Witcher 3 highly enough. I haven't played the first 2 games, I hadn't read the books, and now I'm very glad I didn't. I now get the opportunity to go back to the world and explore it again. I fell in love with it. I get to see and read more of the characters I care about. So if you're looking for a huge experience to sink your time into, look no further. I guarantee you'll get lost in Geralt's world for the near future, and well, until Metal Gear Solid 5, and then Fallout 4. I think this might possibly be the year I make my exodus to the digital world. See you on the other side.